I was 11 when my sister Vesper, my little brother Thorn, and I were nearly swallowed up by whatever the hell took all those people. It was the summer of '98, deep in the woods of Maine, at a campsite about 4 hours from home. Mom had dropped us off with our grandparents for a week of hiking, fishing, and roasting marshmallows, typical summer shit. What we got instead was something that still haunts me to this day. We had just finished dinner, hot dogs over the fire, and were playing at the small playground about 50 yards from our camper. It wasn't much, just an old wooden swing set and a rusted-out slide. But it was enough to keep us busy while the grown-ups sat around drinking beer and talking about things we didn't care about. A few feet nearby, we saw her, a girl, standing at the edge of the forest just beyond the tree line. She wasn't moving, just standing there, staring. Long, tangled brown hair, pale skin, and a ratty dress that looked about 2 sizes too big. No shoes. Her feet were bare against the pine needles and dirt. I don't know how long she'd been there, but when I noticed her, a shiver ran down my spine. Something about her felt off. She wasn't lost. She wasn't scared. She was just watching. Thorn saw her too. "The hell is she doing?" she muttered, pulling Vesper closer. I had no answer. We stood there, frozen, staring back, waiting for her to move. A scream, a giggle, a blink, something, but she didn't. Just after passing few minutes there, I grabbed Thorn's arm. "Come on," I whispered. "Let's go back." We hurried across the dirt path toward our camper, and that's when things got really fucking weird. The camp was empty. Not just our site, everything. No grandparents. No other families. No crackling fire. No laughter. No distant sound of a dog barking. Even our dog, Max, was gone. I spun around, looking for any sign of movement. Our camper was still there, our chairs still set up around the dead fire, but everyone else had vanished. "Grandma?" Vesper called, her voice shaky. "Grandpa?" Silence. Thorn started crying, and I didn't blame him. The place felt wrong, like it had been wiped clean of life. I ran to the camper and stayed inside. Nothing. Just our sleeping bags, our backpacks, the half-eaten bag of chips we left on the table. It was as if everyone had just stepped away for a moment, but we knew that wasn't the case. "They wouldn't just leave," I said, more to myself than anyone else. "They wouldn't just go without telling us." We didn't sleep much that night. I kept thinking about that girl. Had she followed us? Was she out there right now, waiting for us to come outside? When the sun finally rose, the campsite was still empty. No grandparents. No Max. No campers. Just us. We had no phone. No way to call for help. Thorn wanted to leave to walk down the long gravel road leading out of the campsite, but I was too scared. What if we left and they came back? What if we left and something found us? We waited that day. Hunger gnawed at our stomachs, but we were too afraid to leave the camper. By nightfall, we were convinced we'd die there. And then, just past midnight, the lights came, flashing blue and red, flooding through the small camper windows. Voices. Footsteps. I ran outside before I could even think. The moment I did, arms wrapped around me, and I realized it was Mom. She was crying, squeezing me so tight I thought my ribs might snap. "What the hell happened?" she kept asking. "Where's Grandpa? Where's Grandma?" We didn't know. We had no answers. Police didn't either. They combed through the entire site. No signs of struggle. No bodies. No footprints. Just empty campers, abandoned tents, half-eaten meals left on tables, as if everyone had just vanished. Authorities claimed it was some freak disappearance. Maybe people got lost in the woods. Maybe it was a mass panic, and everyone ran off. But that didn't make sense. 7 families. Gone. Without a trace. Even Max. The campsite was permanently shut down, and the case went cold. No evidence. No explanations. No closure. To this day, I can't make sense of it. I never went back. None of us did. But I still think about that girl. That silent, barefoot girl at the edge of the woods. I used to think maybe she was a ghost, or maybe some paranormal activity happened that day, keeping us from whatever horror took the others. But the older I get, the more I wonder if we were supposed to be taken too, and if she was the reason we weren't. Either way, one thing's for damn sure, I'll never set foot in those woods again. I had always been a solo traveler, ever since I was old enough to strap on a backpack and navigate my way through unfamiliar territory. I had been addicted to the thrill of the unknown. The Benton Mackay Trail had been on my radar for years, a rugged, remote stretch of Appalachian wilderness, barely touched by civilization. No crowded hostels, no paved paths, just me, my gear, and the deep woods. I had spent years preparing for trips like this, reading survival manuals, studying animal behavior, learning to navigate by the stars, even training in self-defense. People thought I was crazy for doing this alone, but I wasn't reckless. I knew the risks. My plan was to cover roughly 12 miles a day, a steady pace that would let me appreciate the scenery while keeping ahead of any unpredictable weather. The first day had been smooth, even serene. I set up camp near a secluded creek, made dinner, and fell asleep under the stars, feeling completely at peace. But the second night, that's when things went sideways. It started with a feeling, that primal, gut-wrenching sense that something was off. I had chosen a small clearing off trail, far enough from the main path to stay hidden, but still within reach if I needed to get moving fast. As I was setting up my tent, I caught movement in the distance, a flicker of motion between the trees. I wasn't alone. I figured it was another group of hikers, maybe hunters. No big deal. But as the minutes passed, I realized something wasn't right. There were 6 of them, all men, and they weren't carrying proper gear. No tents, no sleeping bags, not even backpacks. Just standing there, half hidden behind the trees, whispering amongst themselves. I kept my face neutral, my body relaxed, but my mind was racing. Who the hell were they? Hunters wouldn't be just hanging around after dark, and hikers would have gear. These guys, they were watching me, assessing me. My pulse hammered in my ears, but I forced myself to keep moving normally. Fear makes you stupid, makes you panic. I wasn't about to give them that advantage. I switched tactics. If they thought I wasn't alone, they might back off. So I started talking out loud in Italian, pretending to chat with an imaginary companion just out of sight. I started talking in Italian language, like I'm talking to someone. I called, making it sound like I was expecting company any second. One of the men shifted his weight. Another scratched the back of his head. Confused. Good. Still, they didn't leave. I pulled out my hunting knife, making a show of sharpening it against a rock, slow and deliberate. I've never been the biggest person, but you don't have to be huge to be dangerous. You just have to be unpredictable. The silence stretched on. The fire crackled. My hand stayed steady on my knife. Then, just as suddenly as they'd appeared, they vanished. One by one, melting back into the trees. No sound, no words. Just gone. Did I scare them off? Or were they circling back? Screw waiting to find out. I packed up fast, kicking dirt over my fire and shouldering my pack. I knew the nearest ranger station was about 18 miles east, too far to reach in one night, but I damn sure wasn't going to sit here and wait to see if those guys came back. The trail was pitch black, but my headlamp cut through the darkness. I hiked fast, keeping off the main trail when I could, zigzagging through the brush to make myself harder to track. Hours passed. My legs burned. My throat was dry, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. Sometime around 3 a.m., I heard at the distant snap of a branch, too deliberate to be an animal. My stomach turned to ice. They were following me. I didn't think. I ran. I practically slammed into the ranger station, pounding on it until I heard movement inside. "You okay?" he asked, taking in my sweat-soaked clothes and wild eyes. "There's some men out there," I panted. 6 of them. Been following me since sundown. Within minutes, he had called for backup. Another ranger arrived, and they started checking the area. By the time the sun rose, there was no sign of the men. No tracks, no evidence. Just the unsettling knowledge that they had been there. The rangers told me I had done the right thing, that I had probably scared them off. But I knew better. They hadn't just been random guys passing through. They had been hunting, and I had been the prey. I never saw them again, but that night changed me. I still hike, still camp. I never let my guard down. I don't know why the hell we thought camping in the deep woods of Carolina was a good idea. Sarah and I just wanted a quiet weekend away from all the noise. That day we packed up the truck on a Friday afternoon, full of enthusiasm, and drove 4 hours into the middle of nowhere. Our final stop was a small dirt lot near a barely marked trailhead. Beyond that, nothing but trees, rivers, and darkness. The hike-in was brutal. 6 miles of winding trails, steep inclines, and thick, humid air that stuck to our skin. By the time we reached the clearing near a small lake, it was already past 7:30 p.m., and the sun was starting to dip below and getting darker. We set up our tent, started a fire, feeling like we'd finally found some peace. The first few hours were perfect. The lake reflected the moon like glass. Around 10 p.m., Sarah and I crawled into the tent, exhausted but content. I fell asleep almost immediately. Then, at exactly 12:37 a.m., I woke up. It was the kind of wake-up where you don't know why you're awake, but something in your gut tells you that you should be. I listened. At first, it was just the wind through the trees, the occasional crack of a branch in the distance. Normal wood sounds. But then I heard footsteps, crunching of leaves and twigs. Not an animal. My body tensed. I nudged Sarah, who mumbled something and rolled over. I grabbed my flashlight, took a deep breath, and unzipped the tent just enough to peek out. The beam of light swept over the trees. Nothing. Then, out of nowhere, this goddamn drunk-looking man stumbled into our campsite. He was maybe 6 feet, scruffy beard, wild eyes that caught the light like a raccoon. He had this slow, wavering stance, like he couldn't quite remember how legs worked. He looked right at me and grinned. "All in my spot," he slurred. "I swear to God, my blood ran ice cold." "The hell are you talking about?" I snapped, stepping out of the tent fully. "This is our campsite." The guy swayed a little, squinting at me. Then he turned his head and mumbled something to a couple of shadowy figures standing just beyond the tree line. I hadn't even noticed them before, too. Maybe 3 people, just standing there, whispering to each other. Sarah sat up inside the tent. "Austin? What's going on?" "Stay inside," I told her quickly. My heart was pounding, but I tried to sound firm. "Look, man, I don't know what you're doing, but you need to leave." The guy took a few wobbly steps toward me. I could smell the booze on him from 6 feet away. "Nah," he muttered. "This is my site. I camp here every year." "Bullshit," I shot back. "There's no marked sites out here. We hiked 6 miles to get here." He just grinned wider, then suddenly lunged for our tent. Sarah shrieked. I barely had time to react before I shoved the guy hard, sending him stumbling backward. "What the hell is wrong with you?" He didn't even seem fazed. "Ain't your tent," he muttered. "My wife and kids need a place to sleep." I glanced past him, back toward the figures in the trees. Were those his family? They hadn't moved, just stood there, murmuring in hushed voices. My stomach twisted into knots. I pulled out my knife, a solid 4-inch fixed blade, and flicked it open. I'm telling you right now, I said through gritted teeth, you touch my tent again, and I will gut you. Sarah, voice shaking, called out, I'm calling the cops. The guy's grin finally faltered. He blinked at me, then at Sarah, then back at me. Slowly, he stepped back. He muttered something under his breath, something about abusing us and goddamn yuppies, then turned and staggered toward his people. I stood there, frozen, until they disappeared into the darkness of the trees. Even then, I listened. I could hear them moving, getting farther away, but not completely gone. For the next 4 hours, Sarah and I sat in silence, backs against the tent, staring into the darkness with knives in hand. I had never felt so damn vulnerable in my life. By the time the sun started creeping up around 5:45 a.m., we were packed and ready to go. I kept my knife in hand as we tore down the tent, barely speaking. We just wanted to get the hell out of there. The hike back to the truck felt twice as long. We never called the cops. We didn't want to stick around any longer than we had to. The only thing on our minds was getting the hell out of there as fast as possible. But I'm sure, that wasn't just some random drunk camper. North Bend State Park had been on my radar for a while. Located in the backwoods of West Virginia, this place wasn't some casual retreat with neatly marked trails and picnic tables. It was wild, raw, and damn near isolated. The kind of place where you could scream your lungs out and nobody would hear a damn thing. That's exactly why I wanted it. No people. No bullshit. Just me, the wilderness, and my own instincts. I had all my permits in order, my gear checked and double-checked, and for safety's sake, I'd picked a secluded spot by the river. The park had a reputation. Deep, endless forests, thick enough to swallow you whole. Trails that led to nowhere, caves that felt like they had never been touched by daylight. The North Bend Rail Trail stretched for 72 miles, the kind of place where people disappeared and history forgot. But fear? That wasn't my thing. At least, not back then. By second day, I was fully settled in. Caught a couple of bass, set up my fire, and spent the afternoon gathering firewood. That's when I saw him. He came out of nowhere, slipping through the trees like he had been watching. "Hey there, buddy," he said. His smile was all wrong stretched thin, eyes too focused. "Didn't expect to see anyone out this far." He called himself Chester. Something about him set my teeth on edge. Maybe it was the way he kept pushing for details where I was camping, if I had service, if anyone knew where I was. Hell no. I kept my answers clipped, vague, let him know I wasn't some clueless hiker looking for a friend. His eyes flickered when I dodged his questions, but he didn't push it. He just gave me one last grin before going back into the trees. My gut twisted. Something was off. That night, as I sat by the fire, soaking in the silence, I saw movement beyond the glow. Chester, standing there, half in the dark, that same unsettling grin stretched across his face. "Hey man," he called, his voice too damn casual. "You gotta come with me. Found this cool spot, a little deeper in. You'll love it." Yeah, that was a hard no. "I'm good right here," I said, shifting slightly so he'd catch the gleam of my hunting knife. He stared at me for a long moment, then shrugged. "Suit yourself." Then he was gone. Just like that. No footsteps. No sound. Like he melted into the woods. The fire popped. The river hummed. I waited, knife in hand, every nerve on edge. Hours crawled by. The fire burned low. I finally crawled into my tent, blade within reach. Then, past midnight, I heard it. Soft, deliberate steps. Someone circling my tent. Slow, calculated. My phone buzzed. My stomach dropped. Unknown number. A text. "I see you." My heart slammed against my ribs. My phone had been off. No way. No way. Another text. "I'm right outside your tent." Then the zipper moved. Every instinct I had screamed. I grabbed my knife, bolted upright, and roared. "You picked the wrong damn tent." Silence. Then footsteps fast, retreating into the dark. I exploded out of the tent, flashlight in one hand, knife in the other, heart hammering. The woods stretched out, empty. But I knew better. He was there, watching. I didn't sleep. At first light, I packed my shit and hiked straight to the ranger station. 8 miles in record time. I didn't stop until I was standing in front of the rangers, pulling out my story. They checked their records. Their expressions shifted. No camper named Chester had registered in the area. My blood ran ice cold. Everyone had to check in. Everyone left a record. Except him. That meant he wasn't some lost hiker. He was there for a reason. Hunting. Waiting. I left that park with one realization: I had been a target, just one step away from disappearing into those woods forever. I chose this place and even got a permit, believing it would camp safely without hesitation. But still, there are things that can ruin a camping trip. Now, I stay much more cautious and never trust strangers at all. I don't know what the hell I was thinking, hiking alone that late at night. But I had always loved the woods, and living near the outskirts of Brier Hollow gave me access to miles of dense forest trails. Hiking was my escape from the bullshit of life. I'd been walking these trails since I was a kid, knew every turn, every tree, every rock. That night, it was just past 1 a.m. when I grabbed my flashlight, threw on my hoodie, and headed out. I needed the air. My house was only about a mile from one of the trailheads, so I'd done this walk 100 times. Maybe 1,000. It wasn't supposed to be a big deal. The night was cool. The moon was just bright enough to cast shadows through the trees, but I kept my flashlight in hand anyway. The trail started off easy, a steady incline for the first half mile. Then it dipped down into a small ravine. I liked stopping at this one fallen log near the 2-mile mark, a perfect spot to sit and listen to the sounds of the forest. That was my goal for the night, a simple walk. Clear my head, then head back. I reached the log around 1:45 a.m. and sat down, taking a deep breath. Everything was still. The woods at night had this eerie kind of silence. It was peaceful, but in that moment, it also felt wrong. Like the silence was too thick, too unnatural. Then I heard it. Someone coming behind, not the light, erratic scampering of a deer or raccoon, not the sharp rustle of some small animal darting through the underbrush. These were slow, human footsteps on the gravelly dirt trail behind me. My blood ran ice cold. I turned my flashlight toward the sound. I saw nothing but trees. Then, from behind, a thick oak, a man stepped into the beam of light. Jesus Christ. He was just standing there. Mid-40s, scruffy beard, wearing a dirty jacket and jeans. He had this weird, lopsided grin, like he was amused by something only he understood. I gripped my flashlight tighter. You lost or something. But inside, my heart was pounding like a goddamn drum. He didn't answer right away. Just walked a little closer, too close for comfort. "Nah," he finally said. "Just out for a walk." Oh, God. At nearly 2 in the morning, on a trail this deep into the woods, something about him was off. Like maybe he'd been expecting me. I didn't move from my spot on the log, but I kept my flashlight trained on him. "Well," I said, forcing casualness into my tone, "a time for a hike." He chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "Yeah, you come out here often." My stomach twisted. "Sometimes." "How far is your place from here?" "What?" I stood up, keeping my distance. "Couple miles back," I lied. In reality, my house was barely a mile away, but no way I was telling him that. He took a step closer. "You alone, beautiful." "Red flags." "Damn neon red flags." I forced a smirk. "Nah, my brother's up the trail. We were just taking a break." The man's expression didn't change. If anything, his grin got wider. "That's so?" And then, God help me, he asked, "You got a number I can reach you at?" Every hair on my body stood on end. My fingers clenched around my flashlight. I had to get out of there. Now, keeping my voice even, I said, "Let me check my phone." And right then, I texted my brother, "Call me now." Within seconds, my phone started ringing. I answered immediately, making my voice as loud as possible. "Yeah? Yeah, I'm coming back now." "Wait, what? You need me back now?" I threw a glance at the guy. He was still watching me, unmoving. Shit. All right, I'm on my way. I shoved my phone in my pocket, giving the man a quick nod. "Gotta go." He didn't say anything, didn't move, just watched me as I turned and started walking back. I didn't run. Running would make me look scared, make me look weak. But my heart was hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. I walked fast, faster than I ever had. I kept my flashlight pointed straight ahead, but every few seconds I'd flick it behind me. And every time I did, that man was still standing there. Just standing, watching. I don't know how long it took before he finally disappeared from view. Maybe 5 minutes, maybe less. But those minutes stretched out like hours. I quickly sprinted the last stretch, slammed the door shut, locked every bolt, and collapsed onto the floor, shaking. I never called the cops. What the hell would I even say? Some creepy guy asked for my number in the woods? Since then, I never hiked alone at night again.